You wake up when your body is ready. No alarm, no schedule, no meeting in 40 minutes you are already dreading. The sun has barely crept over the horizon, and the air smells like smoke from last night's fire. Still warm, still breathing. Someone near you is already laughing softly about something. Someone else is still asleep. For roughly 300,000 years, this was every single morning for your ancestors. Not as an exception, not as a vacation, as a life. So what did they actually do all day? The answer will probably surprise you, because it turns out the story of ancient human daily life is not a story of relentless survival. It is not a story of constant fear, of running from predators, of barely scraping by. The evidence tells a very different story, a quieter one, a more human one. Let's start with the work. In 1968, anthropologist Richard Lee published what would become one of the most cited studies in the entire history of human behavioral science. Lee had spent years living with and observing the Kungsan people of the Kalahari Desert in southern Africa, a group of hunter-gatherers whose way of life had remained largely continuous with ancient patterns. What he found stopped the academic world cold. The Kungsan worked, on average, between 15 and 20 hours per week to meet all of their subsistence needs. Food, water, shelter. Everything required to live. 15 to 20 hours. That is roughly 2 to 3 hours per day. The rest of their waking hours were not spent working. They were spent doing something else entirely. They talked. They told stories. They played. They rested. They groomed each other. They debated. They laughed. James Sussman, an anthropologist who spent decades studying the Jew/Hoansi Bushmen of southern Africa, documented the same pattern in his landmark 2017 book Affluence Without Abundance. The Jew/Hoansi, Sussman found, were not poor people scratching at the edge of survival. They were, by their own accounting, wealthy, rich in time, rich in social connection, rich in leisure. They simply did not organize their days around labor the way modern humans do. This is the first thing you need to understand about your ancient ancestors. They were not constantly working. Most of their day was free. So what did they do with it? The morning, in most hunter-gatherer groups, began with something recognizable. People woke gradually, not all at once. There was fire to tend, and whoever woke first would feed it. Water needed to be fetched. Children needed to be fed. These tasks were shared casually without formal assignment. Young mothers nursed. Older children played near the camp. Elders sat and talked. Then, usually mid-morning, the work of the day would begin. For the women, this most often meant foraging, moving through the landscape in small groups, reading the ground and the trees and the sky for food. Tubers, roots, berries, nuts, fruits, leaves, grubs. This knowledge was encyclopedic and precise. Your female ancestors knew which plants were edible, which were medicinal, which were toxic, and how each one changed across the seasons. They knew which direction the wind was blowing, and what that meant for where to walk. The foraging trip might take 2 or 3 hours. Then they came back. For the men, hunting was the most time-consuming activity, but it did not happen every day. Robert Kelly, in his comprehensive 1995 analysis of 339 hunter-gatherer societies called the Foraging Spectrum, found that hunting was often a 2 to 3 day per week activity at most. On non-hunting days, men repaired tools, made weapons, helped with camp tasks, watched children, or simply rested. When a hunt did happen, it was nothing like the movies suggest. It was not sprinting and shouting. It was walking, a lot of walking. Herman Poncer and his colleagues at the City University of New York spent years studying the Hadza of people of Tanzania, one of the last truly wild hunter-gatherer populations on Earth. What Poncer found in his 2012 study, published in the journal PLOS One, fundamentally changed what scientists understood about ancient human movement. The Hadza walked, on average, between 8 and 11 kilometers per day. Men slightly more, women slightly less. That is real movement, a sustained, moderate daily rhythm. But Poncer also found something startling. Despite walking all of that distance, the Hadza burned roughly the same number of total calories per day as sedentary office workers in the United States and Europe. Your ancient body was not designed for explosive, exhausting effort. It was designed for sustained, efficient, moderate movement. Long walks, carrying loads, Digging, climbing occasionally, not sprinting, not lifting boulders. The actual kill, when it came, was almost incidental to hunt. The real work was the tracking, the reading of the landscape, the hours of quiet pursuit. And when the animal was brought back to camp, the whole group ate, not just the hunter's family. Everyone. By early afternoon, most of the day's subsistence work was done, and then something remarkable happened. People stopped working. The afternoon in a hunter-gatherer camp was, by all accounts from ethnographic observation and cross-cultural study, a period of profound rest and social activity. People napped. They sat in the shade. They groomed each other's hair, removing parasites in a way all primates do, a behavior that is simultaneously hygienic and deeply bonding. They played with children. They made things with their hands, tools, ornaments, decorations. At Blombo's Cave in South Africa, archaeologists led by Francesco D'Erico and Christopher Henshelwood found evidence of exactly this kind of afternoon work. Shell beads, carefully pierced and strung, dated between 75,000 and 100,000 years ago. Geometric patterns engraved on pieces of ochre. Small workshops for grinding pigment. This was not survival work. This was art. This was decoration. This was your ancestors sitting in the afternoon light and making something beautiful just because they wanted to. And the children ran free in a way that would be unrecognizable to a modern parent. Hillard Kaplan and his colleagues, in their 2000 study on human life history evolution published in Evolutionary Anthropology, documented how much a hunter-gatherer child's day was spent in self-directed play, complex, social, physical play, combined with gradual absorption of adult skills through observation and imitation, not formal instruction. A child would watch a parent track an animal. They would try to replicate a flint knapping technique. They would fail. Try again. Be gently corrected by an elder. Learning was woven into daily life, not separated from it. And an evening came, and the fire was lit. Here is where the day became something entirely different. Polly Wiesner, an anthropologist at the University of Utah, published a landmark study in 2014 in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. She had recorded and analyzed hundreds of hours of conversation among the Jew/Hoansi Bushmen. And she found something extraordinary. During the day, conversations were about practical things. Food, complaints, gossip, who did what needs to happen tomorrow. Normal, functional talk. But at night, around the fire, something shifted. Nighttime firelight conversations were dominated by storytelling, by myth, by spiritual talk, by accounts of distant places and people, by humor and song and performance. Wiesner found that 81% of daytime conversations were about economic and social issues, the practical business of living. But 81% of nighttime conversations were about stories, about the world beyond the immediate, about meaning. Your ancestors sat around fires every night and told each other stories, not as entertainment, not as distraction, as the primary technology for transmitting knowledge, social norms, cultural memory, and identity across generations. The campfire was a library. It was a school. It was the courthouse. It was the church. It was the living room. And this is where the counterintuitive twist arrives. For most of human history, the richest, most stimulating, most cognitively demanding part of your ancestors' day was not the hunt. It was not the foraging. It was the conversation around the fire at night, the storytelling, the social negotiation, the performance of identity, the maintenance of relationships across a network of 50 to 150 people, people whose goodwill, cooperation, and memory of you could determine whether you ate or starved in a crisis. The social world was the work, and it was extraordinarily complex. At Chalvet Cave in southern France, the paintings discovered in 1994 and dated to approximately 36,000 years ago tell us something important. These were not casual scratches. They were deliberate compositions, horses in motion, rhinoceroses arranged in perspective, lions hunting, bison overlapping. They required sustained effort, accumulated skill, and almost certainly ritual context. Someone taught someone else how to do this. Someone came back to this cave in the dark more than once. This was a place people returned to deliberately, as part of a structured practice. Your ancestors had ritual. They had ceremony. They had places they went together to do things that mattered. And then the fire burned low, and people slept not in one long block, but often in two shorter periods with quiet, wakeful interval in the middle, a pattern that sleep researcher Roger Kirch has documented as the natural human sleep architecture before artificial light disrupted it. And the next morning, the sun rose again, and someone fed the fire. Here is what the evidence tells us, accumulated from thousands of years of bones and tools and cave walls and fire pits, and the living memories of people who still carry ancient ways. Your ancestors were not miserable. They were not constantly exhausted. They were not simply surviving from one terrifying day to the next. They were social. They were curious. They were creative. They rested in the afternoon. They told stories at night. They played with their children. They made beautiful things for no practical reason. They had, in many ways, more unstructured time than you do right now. And that time, that long, unhurried, firelit time, was not empty. It was full. You wake up when your body is ready. And for 300,000 years, what came next was not a schedule. It was a life, lived slowly together in full.